It's actually happened. I never thought this day would come. After 25 years, Daniel Levy has left his role at Tottenham Football Club as chairman. And look, I'm not a Tottenham fan, but even I was shocked at this news. Ever since I was born, let alone born, ever since I was interested in football, I have connected Tottenham with Daniel Levy's face. He has been the face of Tottenham Football Club for my whole life and more. This is truly crazy stuff. And it seems as though he's left on his own accord. It hasn't been a sacking from the ownership, because that's the thing that a lot of people get mixed up. Daniel Levy is not actually, or wasn't actually, the owner of Tottenham. He was the chairman. Just in case a few of you got that mixed up. He dealt with transfers. He dealt with a lot of the business administration side. So he still had a very important role. And look, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of the criticisms with Daniel Levy from Tottenham fans, I think, are valid. But I think we can't ignore that Daniel Levy has been a shrewd and very smart businessman at Tottenham Football Club. He obviously, and this is the thing, it's a controversial territory when you start combining football and business. A lot of it can seem like you're trying to suck the soul out of the club, and it's all about the profit, and you're less thinking about results. And that is true. A lot of times in football, that is true. There are so many case studies from around the world where owners have come into football clubs viewing them as purely for profit and purely as a business, just to raise their portfolio and look good to their other billionaire friends and business partner friends and all this stuff. That does happen, you know. And I'm not saying Daniel Levy was exempt from that as chairman, but I do think a lot of it is harsh as well. I'm not going to lie to you. Let's look at Daniel, because obviously this is the thing. I'm not an expert on the technical, administrative side of football. Daniel Levy wasn't a manager. He wasn't a player. He wasn't someone who you couldn't really use the eye test on him. You couldn't just watch him play or watch him coach and say, yeah, he's finished. Or, yeah, this club's never going anywhere with him. It's a bit more nuanced and, yeah, a bit more complex than that. But look, business-wise, like I said, if we're looking at Tottenham, where they were when he came in and where they are now as a business, huge success. They have grown exponentially. I mean, you just look at the recent achievements that Tottenham have had in terms of just business. The new Tottenham Stadium, which when it was opened, when it was announced, what's the word? In its introduction, let's say, I'm forgetting the word. In its introduction, was one of the most complex, one of the most advanced stadiums and pieces of infrastructure that we've ever seen in sport in this country. And still today, Tottenham are reaping the benefits of that. Not only do they not necessarily struggle setting up the stadium, I mean, yeah, ticket prices are very high, but they've also used the stadium for other events which transcend football, which has also brought the club a lot of revenue. We think about how NFL games have been played in the stadium. We've had concerts played in the stadium and so on and so forth. In that regard, he has transformed Tottenham's reputation in a positive manner, in my opinion. And you also look at other stuff. I mean, look, a lot of it is out of my field of knowledge, but securing sponsorships with huge companies, deals, partnerships, all this stuff, if you look at just administrative side off the pitch, I think Daniel Levy has had a positive impact. He's had a positive net impact at Tottenham, in my opinion. Now let's look at the stuff that we can judge a bit better as football fans, which is the manager appointments, player signings, player sales. This is where, and on-pitch success, of course, this is where it gets a little bit more difficult to defend Daniel Levy. Tottenham, of course, is undeniable that in the last 25 years have improved overall as a football club. But is that reflected in on-pitch success? In terms of trophies and silverware? No. I'm sorry, it isn't. It hasn't. I think in Daniel Levy's whole time, they've won, 2 or 3 trophies? I mean, the last one they won, obviously, this year, the Europa League final. But before that, they hadn't won a trophy since 2008. I'm not sure the one before that, but I think even before that, it was a decade or something like that without a trophy. So Tottenham have really built up this reputation of being that bottle job club. And I think part of that is because they have improved so much as a team where you do expect them to win these trophies, And the fact that they don't win them makes it easier and more, comical to laugh at them. Because, you've built a good squad with a good manager and you still can't win. Oh, it's just Spursy, it's Tottenham. So in that way, it kind of shows how the club has improved on the pitch, but also has not reached the next level which clubs like Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool and Man United have reached. But the fact that they're even in this Big Six conversation, I think is a lot down to the business side of things that Daniel Levy has helped implement. And being just in this Big Six conversation, which isn't an official organization, it's not an official partnership between the 6 clubs, it's just a cultural term. But that term holds a lot of weight. If you're in the Big Six, that gives you a whole range of opportunities just by being in that group. You're not only one of the faces of the Premier League as a club, but that also gives more incentive for brands to partner with you. You probably have more fans worldwide as well as a result of it. And shirt sales, all these things, players want to join you more. And also, we saw the Super League, which, let's be honest, a lot of us criticize the Super League, me included. But if the Super League did happen, these clubs that were in it would have gained absolute bucket loads of money from just being in the competition. Spurs were one of the founding fathers of the competition. They would have been in it. And that, to me, is down to them having marketed themselves in a way to allow themselves to be in this Big Six group without actually having the silverware to hold up for it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's complex. But on pitch result, overall, we can agree on that it hasn't been a success under Daniel Levy as much as I think he would have liked to himself. I think even he can admit it's been a disappointment. Is that down to him? Yes and no. But I think it's easy, and I think it's more correct to say that it is mostly down to him. So quickly, before we mention player sales, player signings and failed player signings, I want to quickly touch on the manager side because it's been a hectic journey as well since Levy came. Now look, I'm not going to be speaking about pre-2014 because that really is outside my knowledge in terms of managers. So if you're a Tottenham fan or just a fan in general and you want to comment on manager appointments and manager sackings before Mauricio Pochettino, feel free to let me know in the comments and educate me because, I just don't know enough on that. Starting on Mauricio Pochettino, look, Mauricio Pochettino was given a long time at the job. A long time. And if you look at his trajectory for manager, he joined when they were sort of just the Europa League side, which did have Champions League experience, but they just lost Bale. So some of their players weren't performing. And if you look at where he got them, I think he joined in 2014, and where he took them, it was a success of an appointment. He took them from, like I said, Europa League team, fringe of the Champions League, to second in the league in 2017, third in the league in 2016, and a Champions League final in 2019. And also a League Cup final and the FA Cup semi-final here and there and stuff like that. But it ended with a Champions League final. He was sacked at the start of the next season due to poor results. Now look, that was controversial in itself. The appointment for his replacement was even more controversial. Jose Mourinho. Chelsea legend Jose Mourinho came in. Now look, this is not a bad appointment. It's just interesting to sign the manager who has clowned you his whole career and won trophies and battered you and all this stuff. It was funny. It was interesting. But look, I don't think Tottenham fans could have helped but been a bit excited by the appointment. What was interesting to me is how it ended. Mourinho was sacked, I think, just a week before the Carabao Cup final in 2021 in just his first full season in charge. Because his first season he came in when the season had already started. So the next season when he got to the Carabao Cup final, it was his first season in charge. And he was in the final. Yes, it wasn't going great in the league, but you had a chance at a trophy. And at this point, it had already been 12, 13 years without a trophy for Spurs. This is all they needed. They did not need a top 4. That was already sort of out of the equation. This trophy would have meant so much more than a Champions League qualification. And you sack Jose Mourinho, the manager who has one of the best records in finals out of any manager ever, has got underdog teams to beat some of the favourites time and time again, knows how to out-tactic the best managers on the biggest occasions just for one game in a final, and you sack him for Ryan Mason. and you go, his first or second game was that final, and of course they lost it. That to me and many Tottenham fans was an unforgivable decision. Unforgivable decision. Sack him after the game. Heck, even if you win, sack him. But let Mourinho coach a final. It's an unforgivable sin. He's won at every club he's been to, I think now, except for Fenerbahce. At that point, he'd won at every single club. Statistically, he was going to win at Tottenham at some point if he'd stayed. I'm not saying stay with him until he wins, but give him the final, man. He'd won the League Cup before at Man United and Chelsea. Give him the final. It was a ludicrous decision that I still can't wrap my head around. Now, you look after that, obviously Ryan Mason was let go. He was just an interim anyway. He wasn't even meant to be the main coach. And then in came, it was Antonio Conte. Or, no, it was Nuno Espirito Santo first. He was sacked after 8 games or something like that. And in came Antonio Conte. Antonio Conte again had a tumultuous ride. He didn't really bring success in the league or in cups. And I think in his last game or penultimate game, we all remember that rant he had in a press match, post-match conference, where he spoke about how it was going to continue like this if there wasn't real changes at the structure of the club, and he criticised the ownership and all this stuff. And it was embarrassing to watch if you're a Tottenham fan. But he was sort of just giving you the harsh reality of things. That Tottenham were never going to be a serious club if they continued in this manner of, since Pochettino, just sacking managers, top managers who were, established figures in the game, just because of one poor season or one season without backing them properly. Conte, every other club he's been to, he's been backed. Mourinho, every club he's been to, obviously, maybe there's some outliers, but most clubs these managers go to, because they're so established and they do give you success, you back them. Tottenham didn't do that, and they expected to be given success and trophies by these managers without giving them proper backing. Conte was sacked at the end of the, 22-23 season, or in between the 22-23 season. And then who came in after that? Ange Postecoglou. And Ange Postecoglou was obviously very, sort of, not divisive, but you either love him or you hate him, sort of. Even, I think Tottenham fans either loved him or hated him. He was charismatic, he was stubborn, he was cheeky, he was fun to listen to. He was also sacked after winning a trophy. Now look, I'm one of the people who agrees with the sacking purely because the league finish was so bad. I think he was just such a stubborn coach that they weren't really going to go anywhere with him because he couldn't adapt to adversity like injuries and this and that. But it did seem a little harsh after everything Tottenham were chasing. Finally, when it sounds like they've found a coach who can outlive this curse of just being sacked at the first sign of a poor season or poor form, especially after you won a trophy to qualify them to the Champions League. And he had the love of all the fans. To sack him felt weird. And the Tottenham fans, most of them were not happy at it. I think if they lost the final, of course, I think it would have been carnage and everyone would have demanded his sacking the next day. But because he won, that's what football's about, winning trophies. He'd done something that Mourinho couldn't do, Conte couldn't do, and Pochettino couldn't do. At the end of the day, he won them a trophy. And then obviously in came Thomas Frank. We're yet to see how that plays out. I rate Thomas Frank highly. I think he's a better coach than Ange, but we'll see how that works out. But overall, Levy has been very hit and miss, mostly miss with his managers. I'm going to leave it at that because this segment's going to get too long. On to the players now. You look at the players he's sold over the years. I mean, look, the biggest reputation of Daniel Levy and his whole reputation is that he is a real tough negotiator. Sir Alex Ferguson famously said that negotiating with Daniel Levy was more painful than a hip replacement or something like that. And he wasn't wrong. I mean, Man United themselves were negotiating for a deal with Berbatov, which obviously at its time was lasting. I think it only got done at deadline day, and eventually they agreed on a deal. Same with Gareth Bale. Daniel Levy wants to get the best deal for the club. Don't get me wrong. He sold Bale for a world record fee at the time. But then look at who he replaced those players with. In theory, it was smart to see what Levy was doing. He was selling one player for a bunch of money, especially at the time. And then what he did was sign a bunch of worse players with less reputation, also a little bit less proven, but signed a lot of players who could play on a lot of positions on the pitch for obviously a fraction each of that fee that they sold Bale for. In theory, that could pay dividends because each player could then develop into becoming a Gareth Bale of their own in each position. It doesn't have to be necessarily even a Gareth Bale. If each of them reach a relatively high level, Spurs have strengthened in every single aspect of the pitch by just having sold one player. But that didn't happen. Let's be honest, it didn't happen. And Spurs are still suffering from that. I'm not saying they're still suffering because those same players are there. I'm saying they're suffering because that set them back a lot. You look at the players they signed and how long they stayed at Tottenham. I can't even remember most of them in my head, but you got the names like Paulinho, Ericsson, who was probably the only success. I'm not going to lie to you, I've forgotten them, so I'm just going to search them up here and read them out to you. But let's go through these and say which of them were successes and which weren't. So you've got Roberto Soldado, striker from Valencia, was on great form in La Liga, £26 million, complete flop at Tottenham, 26 million. Eric Lamela from Roma for £30 million and then club record fee. Look, Lamela obviously stayed for a long time and he contributed to a lot of successes at Tottenham. And he did have, I think, overall positive impact, but they could have definitely found a better deal there. I'm not going to lie to you. I would say not flop, but undecided. Not necessarily a success either. Christian Eriksen for 11 million from Ajax, 100% a success. That was probably the only real positive here. You got Paulinho from Corinthians, 17 million pounds, complete flop. Etienne Capoue from Toulouse, 9 million, complete flop. Nasser Chadli from Twente, again, contributed slightly, so less of a flop. It wasn't that much money either, but didn't, set the world alight by any means. And then Vlad Chiriches from Bucharest, 8.5 million, complete flop again. I mean, that's for Gareth Bale, who went on to win, 3-4 Champions Leagues at Real Madrid, a league title, cups, and what did Tottenham win in that time? Nothing. So that was a huge mishap by the club, selling the best player the club has produced potentially ever, honestly, and replacing them with these 7 guys who really, most of them didn't even stay for longer than 2-3 years. And the ones that did, you could really only say that Eriksen was the one who had a real impact on the club. But did Christian Eriksen, or was Christian Eriksen as good as Bale would have been if he'd stayed at Tottenham? No. So this was a real misstep and step backwards, I'd say, for Tottenham. Now we look at more recent examples where Daniel Levy has missed out on big players because of his tough negotiation tactics. Bruno Fernandes. I mean, I remember there being this massive saga, Bruno Fernandes to Man United or to Tottenham, and there were real certain points where it was looking like Tottenham were the favourites to sign Bruno Fernandes. And in fact, at this point, I mean, Tottenham, if anything, were maybe even not more of a lucrative destination than Man United, but they were on a similar level. Obviously, now both clubs have fallen quite a lot from where they were in 2019. But Tottenham were at a good spot. They just finished in the Champions League final. Don't get it twisted. So Tottenham were a lucrative spot. They had Mourinho as manager as well. They fumbled it. He ended up going to Man United for 30, 40 odd million, maybe 50. I can't really remember the fee. But it was clearly too high to convince Daniel Levy. You look at now and see what Bruno's done for United. Not necessarily won Champions Leagues, won them titles, but he's clearly been their best player since he signed. And he's still at the club contributing. Tottenham could have done with that, especially to replace an Eriksen who was leaving and aging by that time. Didn't sign him, missed out on him. Even you go further, I mean, they were even linked to players like Eden Hazard, Aguero, big names that they never signed. And that if they did, would have completely transformed history. And I guess you could look at it and say, well, every club has missed out on that one player, that what if the club went through with this deal? It's easy to say that with hindsight. But with Tottenham, there's not been enough of a, other side of the coin where you can say, oh yeah, we missed out on this guy, but we bought this guy. To sometimes say, yeah, we're going to break the bank. We're going to maybe slightly overpay because the on-field result that we might get from this and the boost to the team to push us to titles will be worth it if it goes well. And sometimes it doesn't go well, sometimes it does. But Tottenham, for me, haven't tried under Levy. They never even tried. And you look at now, what's their transfer record fee? Let me check. Transfer record fee now, Dominic Solanke from Bournemouth for 65 million in 2024. I mean, in a world where most Big Six clubs, if not all I can think of, maybe except Arsenal, have spent over £100 million on a player. You know, it's very far below. You've obviously got Ndombele, Richarlison, Kudus, Xavi Simons, and that's another bit of a weird thing with me, with this whole decision. This summer has been by far Tottenham's most ruthless summer in terms of spending under Daniel Levy. They got Kudus, they got Xavi Simons, they got Kolo Muani on loan, Pelinha on loan, and they agreed a bid for Gibbs White, missed out on him, and there might be some players I'm missing out on. But it was a very positive window from Tottenham. I think all their fans would even say that from Levy. It was a positive sign. And now he's decided to leave. Maybe it was a parting gift. Maybe he knew he was going to leave, so he wasn't really bothering with negotiations as much. But it's been a very good window. Don't get me wrong, it's not been perfect because they did miss out on Eze. And there was still evidence that, they're with trying to over-negotiate and overcomplicate the deal. But yeah, it is a bit strange. But overall, to close off the video, I think this doesn't change as much for Tottenham as they may think. And I know that might hurt to hear as a Tottenham fan, but the ownership isn't going to change. The ownership was clearly happy with Daniel Levy because they let him stay for 25 years. I'm not sure if there's been an ownership change in that time, but probably there has been. But the fact that he stayed for all this time and he's left on his own will, which I'm pretty sure is what happened here, shows that the replacement might not necessarily be a more ruthless spender who's going to sign you top players again. It could very well be another Daniel Levy. But look, it could again maybe be the opposite. So we'll just have to wait and see. But overall, Daniel Levy, great businessman, smart mind, but that may have come at a detriment at times for on-pitch results. Anyways, let me know in the comments what you think about this crazy news. Do you think Tottenham can, explode from here with a new chairman and challenge for the best players and really establish themselves as a top club, as they've kind of been knocking on for a few years now, but they haven't actually really opened the door yet? Or do you think that this is just a false dawn? Let me know in the comments, like and subscribe, and I'll see you lot in the next one.